Thank you and welcome back to this final segment of the show for today. The topic is patterns of African American migration in the United States. And we're talking to Dr. David Padgett, a geographer at Tennessee State University. And of course, Dr. Padgett, before we end today, let's give you an opportunity during this last segment to talk about what you might consider to be recent trends in African American population and African American movements in the United States, because I think that you've demonstrated here that they started in the South, they moved west, and eventually they moved north, and they were in the northern parts of the United States for a long time. But there would eventually become a new development there. And let's talk about that and call it new trends in African American migration.
Okay, well, there's always been a majority of blacks in the South. The majority of the percentage of blacks in the South has always been around, well, 55 to 60% since the 1960s. And so, but still, we still had 40% of black people living outside of the South. But what we've begun to see now in the 1990s is what's called the Back South movement. We're actually starting to see blacks for the first time since emancipation move to the South in greater numbers than they were leaving the South. And there are a variety of reasons for this. Like I mentioned, a lot of blacks came to the North to get into the manufacturing industry. We now know that our economy is now service dominated. The manufacturing industry has declined significantly. And so on all those Rust Belt areas that drew blacks, those are places of economic decline, high unemployment, high crime. And so the economic downturn of the manufacturing industry in the North has been, I guess, juxtaposed to a boom in manufacturing in the South with Dell Computer and the car manufacturing plants and all that. So there's a new southern manufacturing belt that has been a draw for many blacks coming to the South. Well, probably the biggest thing is the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement opened the South up to industry and opportunity for everybody, not just African Americans. And so we went from having very few, maybe several hundred blacks in positions of authority and power to now we have literally thousands of black mayors, chiefs of police, et cetera, et cetera. So the New South now is a place where blacks apparently can get an education. We've had an explosion in the black middle class in the past 2 decades. So all these opportunities are now maximizing themselves in the South, and that's what's attracting blacks back.
In other words, when they left earlier, they were going north in the real sense that we would talk about political oppression and social oppression and et cetera, but it all boils down to making money, the ability to get jobs and et cetera. But now the jobs are in the South, and they are now coming to the southern parts of the United States. And those you believe to be the most recent trends. How long do you think that this movement toward the South will sustain itself? Do you think that it's an enduring kind of movement? What? Are we becoming more national and there's no longer a division? What are some of your thoughts in reference to this?
Well, I think as long as the South continues to grow economically, this trend will continue. In the story I published in Black Enterprise magazine, the primary pull factors are all associated with money. And that in the South, places like Houston, Atlanta, Charlotte, North Carolina, continue to be boom areas. And I don't see that trend slowing down, nor do I see urban decay slowing down in the eastern corridor and in places like Chicago and Detroit. As a matter of fact, Detroit, for the first time since early in the 20th century, fell below 1 million people in population. And Detroit has one of the highest black populations, about 88% black. So these trends, I believe, will continue, with the North losing more blacks and the South gaining more blacks for a variety of reasons: economic, political, just plain quality of life. The crime is lower here. The weather tends to be more favorable for black people in the South. So I don't see that trend changing anytime soon.
In other words, are you suggesting that since black folks lived in the South so long that they had a sort of a predisposition toward the life in the South, which is to say the weather and the conditions and et cetera, and that one reason that they were sort of forced out was primarily because of economic situations, and now they're coming back to the South and they find that the weather and those kinds of conditions that sort of might have been a predisposition not only to black people, but I think most people like nice weather rather than cold weather. And so you think that that might be a terrific draw now with the social situation somewhat changing.
And also what's interesting about this migration is unlike the Great Migration, which was rural population going to urban areas, this is an urban to urban pop movement. So, so the blacks coming to the South are coming not for the southern greenery, but they're moving to the cities in the South. So this is an urban to urban movement. So we've started to see the really large growth of blacks in cities like Atlanta and Houston and Dallas. So it's a different migration in terms of the types of land that blacks are moving to. They're not moving from the farms to the cities and then moving from the cities and going back to the farm. That isn't what's happening. And they're going from maybe a boardroom in New York to a boardroom in Atlanta or Tampa or Miami. So this is an urban to urban migratory pattern this time around.
And of course, Dr. Padgett, let me thank you over the last 30 seconds we have for giving us that excellent information in reference to some of the patterns of African American migration. I think that now when we think in terms of where African Americans are located in the United States, I think our audience will have a very, very good idea in terms of where they are and why they are there. Of course, let me thank you for that. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.